A little bit of a presentation, a little bit of a demo on PowerShell DSC, desired state configuration. I knew next to nothing about this when I agreed at lunch about a month ago to do this presentation. And so I've learned quite a bit, and Tim even emailed me and asked me a question. I was like, hell, I have no idea. And then he ends up sending me a script back, so I appreciate that. It'll be highlighted during the presentation. So what is it? It is introduced in PowerShell 4. My demo system is 2012 R2 box. Interestingly enough, and we're going to hope that everybody stays off their internet just for a little bit, because I don't have a 2012 R2 box local. I didn't feel like putting it on this questionable laptop, so I built it in Windows Azure. So that's where I'm running the demo from. Now, if the internet connection stays stable, which Kevin assures me it will, then we won't have any issues. So that's where I'm going to be running the demo from, as a 2012 R2 box, simply because it comes with Windows PowerShell 4. Didn't have to do anything. If you want to test this on older systems, get Windows Management Framework 4 or 5 now. It's out, right? They got the beta out right now. It is configuration management for PowerShell. That's pretty straightforward. It is similar to what you can do in Config Manager, but it's all done completely within PowerShell itself. So how do you do it? You create what are called configurations in PowerShell. They have some new modules and resources that you access. And you create, well, essentially you're creating a MOF file is what you're doing with PowerShell. And then you push that out to client systems, or you can set up what's called a pull server. I will not be demoing a pull server today because it's quite complicated to set up, and I didn't trust myself to do it. So we're not going to go over pull. I will describe it to you a little bit later. On the client side, there is something called Local Configuration Manager, DCS LCM. It will handle that MOF. It'll take that MOF and it will, basically, the MOF is a set of instructions, a desired state. Local Configuration Manager will handle that. And like I said, I'll show you examples of all of this in a second. So why would you want to do it, right? Well, from Microsoft TechNet, out of the box, with the default resources and modules that are available, these are some of the things that you can do. So one thing that I found pretty interesting is how easy it is to require systems to have certain Windows features, right? And the thing that immediately sprang to mind was, you know, when you're setting up your your prereqs for a config manager server, right? Like distribution point, management point. You know, you got to have IIS installed, ASP.NET 4.5 with the IIS extensions, all these little gotchas that always catch you when you're trying to do the damn setup, right? A PowerShell DCS, perfect for that. Very simple to set up, and I'll show those to you. So maybe you want to ensure that a certain file is always in a certain directory, right? Or that a certain directory is there and it has certain contents. It's simple to set up. You want to make sure that certain processes and services are running. And I'm going to highlight, Tim did a brilliant, giant set of processes and services for client health, which, you know, you want to make sure all these processes are always running. That's something else that DCS can handle. Deploying new software, you can absolutely do that with this as well. So you start overlapping a little bit with Config Manager, but that's okay. Different use cases. Managing environment variables, very simple. And then this the last two actually, automatically fixing a configuration that's drifted. So this is all built in. So you require that a certain process, like what I just did when I killed the endpoint protection agent on my system, ensuring that process is always running. If I kill it, this can make sure that it starts back up when it reevaluates. And then discovering the local, the actual configuration state on a node. Very simple. Again, it's just a matter of either examining the logs or running a simple PowerShell command and getting back a true or false, which is it set up properly in DCS. So is it, what's compliant? That's what I'm looking for. I apologize for the word art. It was the simplest way to show this. So you create a configuration. You compile that configuration into a MOF. That MOF gets pushed or pulled down to the local system, where the local system will then process that configuration and go through with it. All right, I think we're ready for first two scripts.
Is there any aggregation of configuration states for systems that have ADSC pushed to them? I'm trying to think of the use case scenario, DCM versus DSC.
So there's no aggregation between the two, right? There's no overlap between the two.
And you can only have one DSC for
Configuration.
the server. And it's interesting, there's a lot more to figure out with this, but in the current DSC, they really kind of expect you to do a one-time thing. It's not a aggregation and start to rank and all that stuff.
Yeah,
this is for the settings of a server.
Yep.
At least in Rev 1.
Yep. Yeah, the single configuration, I'll actually show that to you here in a little bit, because it's how I kept resetting my demo environment. It was I had a configuration that undid everything that I'm going to do in this demo. And so it's pretty simple to reset it back, but you can only have one. So when I applied that reset config, it undid everything else. So this is the first script, the first configuration. And it's pretty straightforward. There's a new keyword, a new commandlet called configuration, and you're essentially building a function again. Remember when we talked last time about workflows, and workflows are essentially building a function? That's exactly what this is as well. You're essentially building a function. So it's a keyword, configuration, and then the name of your function. I called this one first config. Okay. The first thing that we want to do is tell it which host that this config applies to. Now, I could have put in server name there. I chose localhost, so this config will work on anything. Right? Any machine that gets this configuration can process that as long as somebody hasn't gone into the host file and changed localhost to something else. Right? You can have multiple nodes in one configuration, so you could build a rather large configuration, and each node could have its own specific config section. I'm not sure exactly why the use case is there for that, or what that use case is, but it is possible. And then we start getting into defining the actual config itself. Now, this is a module file, and the modules have resources underneath them. And in this case, I got that back. This is a resource. Modules will come later. This is a resource called file. There are keywords for each type of thing that you want to do. So there's one for file, there's one for registry, there's one for Windows feature. And these are listed out on TechNet, and I got the links in this presentation that show you what those are. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm setting up a file config, and this is the name of it, file first config, or first file config, pardon me. And then we get into the actual config itself. So we're saying ensure equals present. In other words, what do I want to do with this file? Oh, I want to make sure that it's present. I could have said absent, in which case, if that file's there, it'll get rid of it. It'll remove it, delete it. Okay? So I'm saying I want to make sure this file is there. In this case, I'm doing a directory. I could also put file there. In this case, I'm saying I want a directory to be in this location. Recurse true, pretty straightforward. Recurse the source directory, which is the next one, and get everything out of there. Get all of the source files, all of the folders, all of the directories that are in this source directory, and move it to the destination path. So I'm going to move everything from C:\/ source to post destination. And what I want to show you here is the C drive. You can see that there is a post source right here. There is no post destination. Doesn't exist. Okay? And if I look in here, I think I just have a file in here right now, but yeah, just one file. So So this is my configuration. Pretty straightforward. Make sure a directory is there. So you run this. And it doesn't do anything at all. All it does is take the configuration, first config, and make PowerShell aware of it. Okay? Just like a function. It's now available for PowerShell to use. I copied these out here, so I wouldn't have to type it. Spare you guys that.
Make it a little bigger, Donnie.
Yeah. Somehow.
Bottom right.
Well, yeah, but this stupid laptop, I've got to scroll. How's that? Yeah? Good. So now that PowerShell is aware of the first config, I'm going to run it. I want to set an output path. This output path will generate a MOF. This is the MOF file. This is the configuration. So I'm going to run that. Am I still down here? And it tells me that it created a local host.mof file. If there was another node in this, it would have created another mof file. Okay, it'll create multiple ones. If I called it, ABC in my node config here, if I called this ABC, it would have created an abc.mof file. Okay. And now that we have the MOF file, we're going to tell a machine, in this case it's the same machine that built it, but it could be a different machine. I'm going to tell a machine that you're going to use that MOF file. You're going to use this config that I just told you about. So let me run this. Now, if you don't put the wait and verbose, if you don't put the wait tag on this command, it generates a job, so you can't see anything. Right, so I put the wait on here so we can see it. Verbose is pretty straightforward. And I'm telling it where to look. I'm not telling it which file to use. I'm just telling it where to look to get its configuration. The reason I don't have to tell it which file to use is because it's called localhost, so everybody will use it. So let me run this. So a lot of information here. Basically, it's looking at file first config. It's building a list of files that need to be there. Oh, look. That system, that directory is not there, so this keeps going on. It's not in the destination. It's going to build it, and then it'll actually complete the configuration. Let me look at my, whoops. Look at my file list, and yep, POS destination now exists, and it has that file in there. So pretty straightforward. Create a config, compile it into a MOF, and then on the system where you need to run it, run that one command, and we get our configuration handed down to us. In order to make this work, even if you're working on the local machine, so I'm not doing anything remote, I'm doing everything local, you have to do enable PS remoting on that local machine. On any machine where you're going to run this. It's very important. It took me better part of a day to figure that out. So I'm saving you guys a lot of time and heartache. So I want to talk about the local configuration manager. Everybody's got one. If you're on Windows, is it 8.1 that comes with PowerShell 4? Yeah. Everybody has one if you're on Windows 8.1 or 2012 R2, or if you've installed Windows Management Framework 4. The local configuration manager can let you see the config that is on a system. You can set some attributes on that system. Okay? The important attributes on that system are, I want to ignore configuration ID for a moment, apply only, apply and monitor, apply and autocorrect. By default, it's apply and monitor, which means if I went and I deleted that POS destination directory right now, it wouldn't come back. Apply and autocorrect, after a period of time, obviously it would go ahead and look at its config and say, oh yeah, that directory is supposed to be there, I'm going to go ahead and add it back. And it would do that on this interval. Configuration mode, frequency in minutes. This is how often it checks its config and corrects anything or monitors anything that's drifted. Reboot node if needed. By default it's false, which is good. That comes into effect when you do things like install software or add a Windows feature. When you do those, if a reboot's needed and this is set to true, it will actually go ahead and perform the reboot for you. And then refresh mode and configuration ID go together. Okay? Refresh mode is push or pull. By default, it's set to push, which means that if you want a configuration on a system, you take that MOF file, you move it down to that system, and you run that command. Okay? If you set it to pull, there's two options for pull. There's an SMB option, where it'll go to a directory and find its MOF and use that by default. And there's also a web method. Web method, it'll go to IS server, grab its MOF, bring it down, compile it. Okay? Both of those have some gotchas that are associated with them. There are some, like if you do the web portion, if you do the web method, you have to set this configuration ID and it has to be a GUID. And you can generate a GUID from PowerShell very easy, but it has to be an actual GUID. So typically, if you were going to set up a web pull infrastructure, you'd set up your server, and then you would run a PowerShell command on your systems to set, all the attributes that you wanted on your systems, including generating a GUID and then giving that GUID back to the web server, so you know how you have to set those in the configurations. So it's quite complicated. So I'll show you what that joker looks like. So if I run the git, come on, hold on. Oh, that is everything. Let me run that again. There we go. So these are all of the attributes on the local configuration manager. And you can see right now it's set to apply and monitor. And every 30 minutes, it will check its configuration to see if it needs to reapply it, see if it's drifted. And in this case, it won't do anything except just log it that it's drifted. Now, there's another interesting gotcha. This one right here, refresh frequency in minutes. This is if you do a pull server. This is how often it'll go out and check that server for a new configuration for itself. You can't go lower than 15 minutes. And this number has to be a multiple of this. I don't know why. I seriously have no idea why. But that is don't try to set this any lower. So the idea being that you can't go lower than 30 minutes on a configuration drift. Long story short. So this configuration ID right here, the one that has to be a GUID, is blank right now because I'm still on a pull method, or a push method. If this is pull, this has to be set. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, oops, I keep doing that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to, I'll take my word on it. Maybe by the time we're done, you'll see it happen. So I just deleted that posh config, or that posh destination folder. And it'll never come back, because right now I'm set to apply and monitor. But now I'm going to set it to apply and autocorrect. So this is the same thing. I'm creating a configuration called set local, generating my MOF with the set local command output path to there, and then telling this system to go ahead and perform the configuration. So there we go. Now if I,
That's additive over your existing MOF?
yes, because this is a local configuration manager config. And if you look at this MOF, it's not localhost.mof, it's localhost.meta.mof. meaning that it's not a real configuration. Well, it is a configuration, but it's not a system configuration. So, and I want to verify that that folder, yeah, didn't come back. So within 30 minutes, that folder will come back. Now, I just realized that you won't see it happen because I'm going to be applying different configurations here in a minute. And this little command will tell you if you are, if your configuration is drifted or not. That's the wrong way to put it. This will tell you if you're compliant with your configuration. So this returns, I've got to scroll down because it doesn't return much. That's all it returns, true or false. See it down there, lower left-hand corner? So I'm false because I don't have that directory. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and go back and run. I'm going to do the apply again to show you what that looks like. So. And now I'm true. And I'm true because POS destination is there.
Hey, Don.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had multiple things you were changing, how would you know what changed? Just tell it true or false?
You can look in the logs. There's 2 event logs where that kind of data is stored. I don't know where else you can look, to tell you the truth. I know there's someplace else, but I just don't know where it is. I'll see if I can find that and maybe post that up. So I say advanced configuration. It's still remedial. It's just advanced to me. Some of the things you can do multiple settings in one config, obviously. So if you wanted to do all those things I was talking about for a config manager server, you can do that in one config. But you have to do it in one config because the system can only have one configuration. Right? You can do multiple nodes in one configuration. I do not know what that use case is for, but maybe you have one configuration for all of your web servers, right? And then in each one you list out what that config needs to be. Maybe one doesn't need IIS extensions for ASP.NET, right? I don't know. Parameters and configurations. Now this is interesting because you can put a parameter for, say, machine name in a configuration and generate the MOF whenever you need to by passing that machine name in the command line. And I'll show you that in a second. And then you can do dependencies as well. So a good example for this is you install the Windows feature web server, IIS, and then you have another config in that, another section in that same config that says the IIS extensions for ASP.NET 4.5 have to be installed. Well, that depends on IIS being installed in the first place. So I'll show you that as well. So this config is pretty simple. What I'm doing now is I'm ensuring that the Windows Update service is set up to automatic and running, and I'll show you that that is not the case right now. Man, I hate scrolling on here. Give me a second. Windows Update is running, but its startup type right now is manual. All right. I am making sure that a local group, I'm using the keyword group, making sure that a local group called CTSMUG is present on the system. And you can actually specify members here as well. So if you wanted members in that group, there's a members keyword that goes right down here with ensure. And then I'm ensuring that an environment variable, that's what the environment keyword is for, an environment variable called tools directory is present. The name of it is called tools.dir. That's the environment variable name. The value is /tools. And this is the dependency. Depends on the group CTSMUG. Right? Now, I'm going to run this, and trust me, the group isn't there, and the environment variable doesn't exist. I don't need to show that to you. All right. Whoops. Oh, I just generated them off. Now I gotta. Why did I not put that on there? All right. What did I call this? Setup tools. You know what? Let me do this. Sorry, I didn't put the compile on there for some reason. And it went by pretty fast, but you saw a green bar that popped up. That's it going through the process of making sure that all the modules that it needs are installed on the system, because there are third-party modules that you can import. But that all the modules are there, and then it goes through the process actually ensuring that everything is set up properly. Let's go look at the system real quick. Let me refresh this. My startup type has gone to automatic. We have oh, that's not what I wanted. The user group CTSMUG is now present, and there's an environment variable called tools directory now. So fairly straightforward, fairly quick. The next one here is one that has a parameter. And so this particular one, like I said, it's just like a function, so it can take all kinds of parameters. The parameter is machine, means that I'm no longer setting it to localhost. I'm setting it to a variable that I'm going to pass it when I compile this MOF. Otherwise, I'm doing the same things. I'm adding the group. An interesting thing that you can do is I could have a parameter called group, right? Up there with machine, I could add a parameter called group, and this group name could be that parameter. So I could, if I wanted to compile a MOF that said, you know, I have to ensure that CTSMUG is there, or that, you know, tools admin group is there, whatever. I can compile that at the time, or I can send that to this function at the time that I compile it. And otherwise, it's same thing. You can see this time I'm going to pass this particular configuration the machine name. So I'm not just doing the setup tools by itself now. I'm handing it a parameter called machine name 2012R2. That's the name of this box. And then applying the configuration. The good thing about parameters are I could put multiple machine names here, right? I could have v1, v2, v3, v4, localhost, whatever, right? I can have all of those on this command line. That's why parameters are so nice. And there's not much to see here, but you can see that it's going through the same process. So if I look in this directory for the output, you'll see that instead of localhost, I have this machine name.mof. All right. Oh, TimScript. You got to see TimScript. Where is it? TimScript. I didn't pull any of your personal data out, Tim. I apologize. So I don't know. Is that? I guess it's okay. I don't have Zoom it on this system.
All right, that's all right. Just change your font size.
Yeah. Ooh, let's make it 20. Wow, that's really big. So this is one that Tim built, and it's pretty straightforward. He's asking for a parameter called configuration manager install arguments, and he just set it to true. Means that this won't run unless those command arguments are sent with this. It ensures here, I didn't have an example of this one, but the keyword package, that's an app install. So he's ensuring that this app is always installed on machines that receive this config. And it's pretty simple to tell what that is, right? Everybody knows this one, right? And then the arguments, you can see that's the parameter that he asked for. So he's taking the parameter that's fed to this at the time that it's compiled and using it as the arguments for his install. Everybody knows Tim's user ID now. It's tim.mittner. That's a tough one. I probably should have cleaned out the product ID. The product ID is not unique, yeah.
Yeah, the product ID is the SEM install code.
Yeah, and you can, there's actually a PowerShell command to get that. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. And then he's making sure that a bunch of services are running, right? Bits has to be automatic and running, Win management, Windows Update Service, LANman, RC, you know, all the normal ones that you need for a healthy client, right? More services, policy agent, services. Here's an interesting one. There's another keyword, a new keyword, registry, right? So that this particular registry key, which is DCOM, is there and that the value is set to yes, right? And then at the bottom here, we see the example of compiling, which is the second to last line. This is the compiling the configuration with these command line arguments. So now everybody knows Tim's management point name, right? And then this is what you would run on the client to ensure that that happened, right? So a good use case for this could be you could possibly do it as a startup script, right? If you don't use configman for builds, it can be part of your build process. I don't know why you would want to do that, but maybe you can't, right?
I was just going to say, once you get this compiled and set on the machine, I mean, it just runs every 30 minutes.
Yeah.
As long as you set the auto fix, it's going to keep checking for all those items, and if it's not there, it's going to fix it. So,
You know, one thing that we didn't show you, one of the resources that we didn't show you on any of them.
the reason why is because this depends on WMI. I actually, that's what
Yeah, that's what the question was. We were.
That's what I usually talk about. It was like, hey, how can we fix WMI inside of DSC? It's like, well, then I thought about it. It's like, well, WMI is not running, DSC's not running.
Yeah, DSC won't run if WMI is short.
WMI isn't running, there's a whole lot
Yeah.
of other problems you gotta handle yourself.
So one thing that I don't have an example of, and it's not in this one either, is there's another keyword, just like registry and service and file and all that, called script, which means that it'll run a PowerShell script. So if you have more advanced configurations that maybe this doesn't handle, you can do it. Bless you. You can do it with a PowerShell script. So.
One of the things, so when I created this, we had a customer that was looking to try to do something like this, and when I created this, I went out and looked at all of the VB scripts that were out there and all the stuff that they configured. And like Dan Thompson has got a great script, and that's basically where I pulled most of these settings from. But his script is, 1,500, 2,000 lines long, and all it does is check for these settings.
Yep.
So I was able to convert 1,500 line script to 50, 60 lines of just INI file settings and do the exact same functionality.
Yeah. I mean, I can barely span the scroll bar on this one. It's not much. So very handy. And I'm not going to say that we'll share that. I'll let Tim make that determination. So we have quite a few that come out of the box from just with PowerShell 4. Quite a few: registry, file, service, package, script, Windows feature, all kinds of stuff. But the PowerShell team has been releasing resource kits, and they release them quite often, as a matter of fact. Now, I don't think that they're building all of these, especially when you look at some of the names that are in this list. I think what they're doing is they're certifying them, right? There are 5 resource kits currently available. They add 23 new modules and 77 resources. These are the 23 new modules. So it gets really interesting very quickly. Active Directory, for example, you can have a configuration that will configure Active Directory. Even it'll go so far as to create the Active Directory. You can set up failover. You can set up, high availability. You can set up all kinds of things with that particular one. There's database. So if you have a config for your SQL servers, right? Especially config man, if you aren't, if you're not your own SQL admin, this is a way you can kind of make sure that those SQL admins stay out of your business, right? You can set up configurations for your database and make sure it's set a certain way. MySQL, same way. Hyper-V, Windows Azure. My grand goal when I was building this demo was I was going to come in here and I was going to have some sob story about how I lost one of my Azure VMs and then kick a configuration off that went and ran it. Well, guess what didn't happen? I didn't build that. But it would be possible. You can actually create VMs. You can create clouds. You can create blobs. You can do the whole 9 yards in Azure. So it's very, very cool. Windows Update, Windows Event Logs, so you can configure settings on the default Windows Event Logs. You can create new ones, all kinds of stuff. An interesting use case for that is if you have scripts that do logging into the event log today on your systems, right? You can have a configuration that will create a PowerShell event log just for your scripts, right? And ensure that that's always in place on all of your systems. So you can log to that one instead of maybe application. Failover clustering, RDS, all kinds. So, and they release these quite often. I mean, honestly, it's been, what, 3 or 4 this year, right? Something stupid like that.
A lot of community provided.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. These are just the ones that they've looked at, right? So now the interesting thing about this is, remember when I was running these configs, you saw that green bar flash up there real quick, right? What it's doing is, one of the things that it's doing, one of them, is that it's ensuring that the proper module is there on the client system. If you set up a pull server, doesn't matter which kind, file or web, if you set up a pull server and you use one of these third-party modules, you're going to take your module and you're going to put it in that directory with the configs that your machines are going to be grabbing. And once you do some magic with making sure that they're not signed, it's, there's something you have to do to, basically it's a security thing. It's like signing it with a certificate. But once you ensure that the modules are proper, your clients will automatically grab that module and pull it down if it needs it. So it's actually a little bit intelligent about that. And quite honestly, it wouldn't be that difficult. I think it would be a lot easier than trying to do it outside of using DSC.
So you have to write DSC essentially in order to do PowerShell.
Right, yeah. So here's one that's just a little bit more involved. This is one that'll take a few minutes so we can get some more questions. You can see that, if I'm not standing up in front of the screen here, I'm going to install IIS. I'm going to install RSAT. I'm going to install bits. Now, when you do these Windows features, imagine that you're doing it through the GUI, and you go add remove features, right? And you say, I'm going to install web server. Some of those boxes will be automatically checked for you underneath it, the defaults. That's what's going to install here. There is a command that you can put here in this section of these configs to say install everything, or pick certain ones. Right? If you want to, and quite honestly, it wouldn't be that difficult. I think it would be a lot easier than trying to do it outside of using DSC.
So you have to write DSC essentially in order to do PowerShell.
Right. Yeah. So here's one that's just a little bit more involved. This is one that'll take a few minutes so we can get some more questions. You can see that, if I'm not standing up in front of the screen here, I'm going to install IIS. I'm going to install RSAT. I'm going to install bits. Now, when you do these Windows features, imagine that you're doing it through the GUI, and you go add remove features, right? And you say, I'm going to install web server. Some of those boxes will be automatically checked for you underneath it, the defaults. That's what's going to install here. There is a command that you can put here in this section of these configs to say install everything or pick certain ones. Right? If you want to do certain ones, they don't even have to, it would be a new Windows feature underneath here. So RSAT will not install AD certificate services, for example. It's not a default, right? I could do another Windows feature specifically for that. Now, to get a list, you see that these names are not, they're common names. It's what we know as, right? If you need to get a list of the Windows features, there's actually a PowerShell command. Windows feature. Yep. This is the name that you use for a Windows feature. It's over here on the right. And just to show you that I'm not cheating, you can see that none of the RSAT stuff is installed. All right, there's no check here, so none of the RSAT stuff's installed. IIS is installed. There's no web services or anything running. And then I'm putting a file in a certain location. This file is going into inetpub, which does not exist. So I have to put a depends on. Inetpub will be created when IIS is installed. So that's what I'm saying there. So I can't put that text file there yet. And then all I'm doing is compiling it with line 36, and on line 38, applying that config here.
So, Donnie, on the file, you show that it depends on the feature IIS.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is running in script order, IIS ahead, why don't you put that configuration above IIS Windows feature?
It should be fine. Because you can't guarantee that it will run in script order, right? Because once it's a moth, it's put down on the system, right? You don't know what order it's going to be in. So you can probably look at it. There's probably some logic. I don't know if it's alphabetical or what, but just use depends on. Don't try to do it in an orderly fashion. So, and this name on the depends on is the name that I gave that feature up above, right? The Windows feature is not called IIS. That's just what I called it, right? So.
One thing I already did is the service doesn't have a depends on functionality.
Yes.
That was really annoying.
Yeah. So I'm going to run this, and this takes a moment because RSAT is a chunky install. And you'll see that it's there was collecting data. That was it looking at the Windows feature, that command that I just did, right? And now it's going through and installing prerequisites for IIS. It's installing prerequisites for RSAT. It's doing all this stuff for you. So this will take a moment. So any questions? This is a lot, and it's kind of an odd feature, but one that I think for pre-config man environments, something that's very handy, and in some use cases for config man. So, any questions? No? Well, we'll let this run for a moment. Are we?
Just got it, so we'll set it up in probably
Okay.
5 minutes or so.
All right. Let me go back to the thing. I've got. I'm gonna let that run for a moment. I got some links in the presentation. PowerShell team blog. This is where you'll find all the announcements about the resource kits. I mean, other than their normal blog announcements, but this is where you'll find resource kit announcements. Hey, scripting guide, pretty straightforward one. PowerShell.org, obviously. This is interesting. I did not know this. PowerShell Magazine, the guy that runs that works at Dell. Had no idea. Had no idea. Don't even know who he is. But anyway, yeah, MVP, PowerShell MVP, works at Dell. No clue, huh?
Guy in India?
Yeah, yeah, Rami. I didn't know him. So anyway, but dude has a ton of great information. He also has a big section on setting up a pull server. There are a couple of people out there that have used DSC to install the pull server and get it configured for you. So there are some automated methods to do that. All you do is you take the moth that they give you, run it on your system that you want the pull server to run as, and then it'll go through and configure it for you. So, and that is it.
It gets really cool when you tie in what you talked about last time with PowerShell workflows.
Mm-hmm.
Tie PowerShell workflows in that DSC and do some pretty amazing things.
Yeah, with something like that, you wouldn't, if you wanted to push out a config to everybody, use a PowerShell workflow to push out the DSC, you get it done in a fraction of the time it would normally take. Right? This guy's going to take a minute. Like I said, RSAT takes for freaking ever to install. So, well, that's it. Lunch is being set up, apparently. If you have any questions or anything, let me know. But otherwise, that is it.